Hello, everyone. Greetings. Welcome to the entrepreneurial-led economic development entrepreneurial communities through new eyes, the right eyes. So it is the PDU of the Academy of Management, which became and changed the format in a new virtual presentation. So the number of this PDU is 18,303, which is sponsored by the Entrepreneurship Division and the team, Technology, Innovation and Management Division. We would like to thank you. And today we're gonna start this introductive session about the discussion on ecosystems and engage in an open discussion after a few presentations. So before I pass the spot to Norris, I would like to open the session and present myself. So my name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm professor of entrepreneurship in Toulouse Business School in the south of France. And I have been working on entrepreneurial ecosystems the last 10 years with a special focus on business incubators and co-petition strategies, the strategies they have with other ecosystem members. And what we can see with this uncertain situation and the COVID situation now, the crisis we face, is that several actions are needed based to the individual actions, how we can reimagine what we do. We see, for example, the Academy of Management changed from the physical discussion to a more virtual one. But also beyond these individual actions that we all of us are faced to do, I was wondering what are the discussions and the questions about the ecosystem level, how the ecosystem change, what are the mechanisms of resilience, what dynamics they are, and how the ecosystem transform. So this is some general questions I had in mind. And I'm sure that based on the presentation we'll see today, we'll see other questions emerging, so we can continue this discussion in other online sessions in the next months. So this session will be available, and the chat is recorded also, so we encourage you to share information during the session. So actually, we are not, this decision to conduct this discussion was a very last minute decision, but this happened. Why? Because we have this ecosystem building, this is a team, this is a lot of persons inspired and willing to connect and share knowledge and ideas on ecosystems. So you can see here some of these people based on which we are able today to have this discussion. I forgot a lot of images, and sorry about that, but know that behind there's a lot of people willing to contribute and continue this discussion on ecosystems. Also, I would like to share with you some previous events. Last year, we had the opportunity to conduct this discussion on ecosystems and immerse new ideas about research, what is missing, what we need, what is ideas from practice that we can maintain the discussion in this field. We have also several actions during the last year with several workshops. So the idea is to engage the community around ecosystem and provide workshops, roundtables all around the world to engage to this discussion and contribute to building our knowledge around ecosystems. So we had some workshops during the Global Entrepreneurship Week, for example. And what about the reminder today? So the PDW, we organize it with Norris, and we have the pleasure today to have with us great speakers on ecosystems. We have the pleasure to hear Eric Stam. I hope he's with us in the presentation to talk about transdisciplinary entrepreneurial ecosystem and how we can build a research protocol. We also hear Antonio Rios from his perspective about new emerging ecosystems and the virtual university ecosystem that were new initiatives based on the changes and the health crisis. We'll also have the pleasure to hear Yipen Liu about the cultural part and the importance of culture within the entrepreneurial ecosystem and how culture can change in different places. And we'll also have the pleasure to hear Bernd Wurth about the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Research Network, which is a network trying to connect ecosystem builders all around the world and engage in actions and discussions on research on ecosystems. And also in the end, we'll also have an open discussion about what is missing, what we need to study more, and how we can proceed this discussion. Before I pass the floor to Norris, I would like to, we have provided a list with the resources around ecosystems. And also I would like to say that you will have all this material based on the recording of the video, the slides, and all of these links afterwards in the Academy of Management portal. And we encourage you to go and see this video and resources there's about the ecosystem and also contribute to this reflection. For example, there is a video about understanding entrepreneurial ecosystem of about an hour. There is an article about how we can build sustainable ecosystems and what is the importance of the place, the governance, the bottom-up governance, and the co-petition relationships. There is open discussions and video about the eShip initiative of the Kaufman Foundation and the ICSB. We also have resources about the discussion how we can engage as an educators, our students, to build a sustainable ecosystem and engage them in this ecosystem mind shift. We have discussions about the education in different contexts in Mexico. And we also have this, portal about histories of ecosystem builder hubs and stories of ecosystem builders that I'm sure that Norris will deepen this part later on. So I hope I was not so long. Norris, can you please describe us this PDU, the history, and probably link with the S-ship goals?
Okay, I would be happy to if I could always figure out the camera. Yeah, you know, someday I'm going to start. You know, that picture I wish I looked as good as the pictures they put up on there. Could you go to the next slide? Yeah, with all the craziness of going virtual and the Academy changing their mind, being very slow to actually respond, and because it's such a big organization that they seem to be changing their minds. But this is actually an opportunity that this isn't, you know, yes, we're giving up sitting around tables, having wonderful discussion. So Christina and I thought, well, we'll just have these discussion tables virtually. It's other people, other groups have found this to be actually quite productive. The exciting part of this is that the Academy said, well, we want to upload. The uploads have to be done tomorrow, so we had to do this today. But we'll be uploading the video and chat from here. I would note at the bottom that there's a link to the PDW Ecosys Wiki. That's a Google Doc that you can post links to resources. You've got great stuff, you know, please add that. Officially August 8th, 2:15 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the session will be running. They will run the video. People will be able to comment, but we can't particularly respond. But that's okay. We're going to start the ball rolling. We have so many amazing people that are on this call and then been involved in it. I'm really excited. I think we're going to do some great things. Next slide. Anyway, so what's next? One is bombing you guys with emails about trying to identify the Hilbert questions of the field. So if you haven't responded to that, please click on that link. And as we just said, we're going to do a webinar series, these virtual discussion tables. And if you're interested in leading, hosting, or helping, the same Google form has, you can chime in. But the real goal is, this is a meeting of minds. I look at the 20-some people on this call right now, and there's a mix of great scholars, some great educators. We have entrepreneurial support people. We have angel investors. We have ecosystem builders on there. We have, I noticed we've got, educators like Nigel Adams, young scholars like Jackie Zonka-Piran, Alexa Janeska, who's trying to save Macedonia. Just Alistair Brett, who is one of the great thinkers of ecosystem dynamism. Maxime is a great researcher. Bernd apparently just defended his thesis, so the fact he's still alive is a good sign. So, but we want to get conversation going among all this group. In 2019, the one takeaway that people said was, we want to hear from the practice and policy side. So next slide. Next slide. How many of you have, I'm not sure how many people have heard about David Hilbert, but he did something rather extraordinary. The first professor I ever heard in college, even before the first day of classes, was the Nobel laureate and smartest guy in the world, Richard Feynman. So you got to go hear him, right? And he was talking about how to do great research. He says, yes, you may need resources, you may need expertise, but you'll never do great research without great questions. In fact, he said great bleeping questions. He was very emphatic about that. Anyone can come up with a good question. Not everyone can come up with a great one. That takes some thinking. So where do we start? Well, going back in time, the world's smartest guy in 1900 was David Hilbert, a great European mathematician. And he was wondering, is mathematics growing as a field, or is it just getting bigger? He was very concerned. So if you're the smartest guy in the world, you get all of your other smart buddies together, and they came up with a list of questions and problems that math needed to address if the field was to move forward. And I think there were like 26 of them. 8 of them were insoluble, impossible to solve. And when they announced the list of, those are insoluble, huh? Well, hold my beer. And a couple of them got solved almost immediately. Some of them got solved decades later, some are still unsolved. But what the field learned from just asking the questions, from addressing them, trying to answer them, accelerated mathematics amazingly. So I think it's a great place to start for questions. Can you click? If you notice, the first picture is that Hilbert was one of those pictures of everybody looking really like cranky. And I like this picture better because he's got a hat, looks almost happy. But we get to be the Hilberts of our field. It's not going to be me, not going to be Christina. It's going to be all of us. So next slide. Anyway, here are the questions that have come from the survey so far. There are a bunch of them. I don't want to spend too much time on them, but these are questions where more than one person responded to something like this, as I categorize this. There are some measurement issues that, the biggest one is, how do we model and measure impact? And I like to hear that, because it's not just, let's find some useful metrics, because that usually ends up vanity metrics, but what are the, how do we model this and be clear about this? Because no matter how good we do in terms of measurement, it won't be helpful to practitioners and policymakers unless we have at least a conceptual framework. Maybe someday we'll have a theory or theories of ecosystems, but the dominant models are very top-down, institution-led, and people like Startup Genome have already started building taxonomies of ecosystems, but beyond that. Next slide. For lack of a better term, the political economy is a very hot topic. an important one is how do we talk a lot about diversity, inclusion, engagement, but how do we model that? How do we measure that? We've had some good work done in social network analysis, but modeling and measuring how we systematically bridge all of these different stakeholders. Maybe the single most popular one is sort of the governance question. How do you deal with the people who want to own the system? They're, we call them the bullies and braggarts, the BBs, the czars, is figuring out how do we, maybe the deeper question is how do we figure out how to manage the governance of that. There's also a political issue, and particularly hot in the United States, is people are saying, well, new and small businesses are unimportant compared to chasing unicorns, even though that UN, ILO, World Bank, OECD, IMF, all USSBA has pointed out that new and small firms are who leads us out of the economy. In fact, it's already showing up that smaller firms are the ones creating jobs now in the U.S. Next slide. And some of just sort of the psychological part. One that showed up last year and showed up again this year was fascinating, is from different groups all talking about mental health and wellness. And I think that speaks well of us as well as a field, that's an important issue, is figuring out how that fits in. Next slide. Christina, do you want me to do the eShip thing first, or do you want me to do that later?
I think you can tell us as you wish. I don't know. I think it will be nice to have this link.
Okay, well then I'll just plunge ahead, then I can take a nap after that. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna take a quick peek at the chat and see if anybody's heckling already. That this is excellent. I see quite, yes, how are we dealing with COVID? There are at least there is a lot of work being done on that, but that's a great question. So these slides look better, it will look better than the prior slides because they're pretty much done by Christine Lai of the Kauffman Foundation, who is much better, like Christina, is much better at PowerPoints than I am. So a shout out to them. Next slide. Anyway, if you haven't heard about eShip, it's an initiative that was launched in 2017 by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. Big funder, maybe the biggest funder of entrepreneurship programming, that they have been in this game a long time. And their conclusion was, we're going to remove barriers to people starting a business. Then we need to think about making ecosystem building into a profession. So how do we support ecosystem building and by extension, ecosystem builders? That then moving forward, kind of getting several hundred people together to sort of figure out where do we go. We come up, design 7 overarching goals that we're going to, if we're going to solve this problem of ecosystem building as a profession, we need to get started in. And now we're in the phase of starting to deliver with projects. However, not so early that there isn't room for any of you to get involved. Next slide. Anyway, this is sort of the basic logic model that it's a little clunky. It may seem a little clunky, but it works well in the nonprofit world. But if the local community needs to be a healthy community, you need a healthy economy. Healthy economies need entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs need a healthy ecosystem, and ecosystems need someone, people who get it, that it's bottom up, it's entrepreneur led, that it's not top down institution led. If it's going to be healthy, but if you're going to have builders, then we need to have a professional field. Next slide. There'll be a quiz on these tiny letters, but there are 7 overarching goals that, think about the Sustainable Development Goals, that starting with how do we make the field truly inclusive, truly engaging everyone, not just, not just, for instance, not just the high tech, high growth. How do we build a collaborative culture among those participants? How do we generate a shared vision? Then how do we build networks and connect them? I'm biased. I'm very involved with goal 5, which is how to be more evidence-based. That metrics methods, while several of the people on this call, like Alistair Brett, have been doing phenomenal work in that area. Universal support, how do we get buy-in from both internal and external stakeholders? And 7, sustainable work, how do we do stuff that will last, and that really boils down to how do we get paid? So next slide. That there are going to be, you'll see these in the slide, there's some great resources there. This is the ecosystem building playbook that Kaufman is coming out. Version 4.0 should be out fairly soon. Go on, next slide. Now, under each of the goals that the eShip folks came up with, they sort of prioritized initiatives. And these were somewhat politically negotiated by various folks. One of the things that I did not mention is that, along with several hundred of attendees of the summit, we're having monthly calls around each of the 7 goals, and it's cast an even broader net. There are 12 gold champions for the 7 goals. Yeah, I know the math doesn't work, but we're each attached to 2 or 3 or more of those. That in the process, what are the projects, the actual things we could do to move forward? And basically, we need better metrics, better methods, and better research. In fact, this is really falls under 5.3. So we have a lovely excuse to keep doing this and reaching out more broadly across, which is now well over 1,000 people in the eShip broad network. There's some phenomenal people on the ground, but this is too much to read right now, but happy to talk about that later. Next slide. And these are projects that are already being considered. Amy is, if you're interested in that, Alistair Brett's on the chat. We have some stuff we have included. The Louisiana means Michael Meeks is in the house. Very fascinating. That building, trying to build a repository of truly proven practice, proven metrics. Trying not to use the word best practice, but there's a lot of mythology of stuff that works and maybe it doesn't, stuff that doesn't work that maybe does. We need to be looking at that. So next slide. And these are some of the projects across the goals where things are going. Again, this will be easier for you to look at later. But they are making progress, but not so much progress that we can't do. We're not going to go into a lot of depth unless you want to talk into it when we get to the Q&A at the end. So next slide. Anyway, resources. The community dashboard has links to pretty much everything involving eShips. If you want to do deeper dive on the goals there and the existing projects and the playbook, there is a great active Facebook community, eShip community. There's also a great Slack channel. We're very active and we're happy to connect you. But fortunately, nobody else has taken the hashtag eShip, so that also helps in terms of social media. I'm going a little fast. If you've got if you want to yell at me to slow down, let me know. Next slide. And some other resources here that there's a lot of stuff, stuff that's spun out of Kaufman. This America's New Business Plan is not just American, but it's an incredible laundry list of tested economic and political policies to advance entrepreneurship. That I definitely recommend The ecosystembuilderhub.com is also an output of the eShip initiative that is chock full of great stuff. That the Keystone podcast is incredible sort of long form interviews. There are a lot of other stuff that are rolling along. Let me just go on to the next one. Anyway, here's the really important part. You want to get involved in this, and I recommend that you get involved in it. A number of people from the Entrepreneurship Division and from ICSB have already joined the initiative. Look at the goals, look at the initiatives under the goals, figure out what speaks to you. You can identify one of the listed projects that intrigues you, or suggest your own. Join a monthly goal meetup, and let's get involved. Okay, next slide. Anyway, there's Christine, who's responsible for why these slides look better than mine. But please feel free to reach out to us. I'm looking at, there were a couple questions in the chat. I love the suggestions of some of these people who are who've been chiming in. Thank you very much. Question from Nigel said, are resources available for non-US organizations? A definite maybe. That Kaufman is not, because of the terms of Mr. Kaufman's will, that the lawyers have interpreted that the money can only be spent in the United States. That doesn't mean that it can't be spent on non-US organizations. Just have to be a little bit clever about it. For instance, we can't send money for a plane ticket to Nigel, but we could buy the plane ticket and fly him in if those resources made sense. So this is kind of what Kaufman has been trying to do is partner, so it's not just them spending money, because let's just say their portfolio took a hit like everybody else did. But they have a series of, there's 40 or 50 national resource partners, some of whom are global in scope, that are interested in this space. Everybody from Techstars to Startup Genome, Living Cities. You'll see a link to that also on the dashboard. So finding a lot of them can provide resources outside the US. If it's a great idea, we'll see how we'll figure out how we can help you. Were there any other questions?
Yes, Nori, there's a question of Mobedruni. Probably he can ask the question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Norris, hi, nice to see you again. I don't know if you remember me, but
I do.
Perfect. So my question to you, and I want to give you a hard time this morning, I don't know. How can you relate the model you just developed to Eisenberg models with its pillars? Are there something different? Are there something similar?
Well, I'm not a fan of Eisenberg's work because it's static. He's got sort of silos.
Yes.
And we realize that it is this interconnected, it's a complex, adaptive, connected system. And if you want to know more about that, Alistair Brett is on the chat. He wrote a great book, came out earlier this year, called Admired Disorder. I would look at Victor Wong's book, The Rainforest, explains it much better than I do. But the important thing is that it really is an ecosystem. We have to embrace the fact that things are connected in odd, peculiar ways. It's a network of networks, and it's not even, it's not a centralized network. They tend to be very flat, distributed networks, for all you electrical engineers out there. And it changes and morphs over time in ways that we need human beings to be alert to that and be able to help people to navigate it, to help other people to navigate it. The silos, the pillars have been around. The OECD actually proposed these pillars a couple decades ago, and everybody said, what the hell is an ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem? and sadly, the original report has no author listed, so we don't know who to give credit to for the pillar model. But I love this complex dynamic system. It means we have to use things like social network analysis to study it, but we probably need to use graph databases to track the temporal and causal links. But I think this complex model is much messier, but it's much more real, because ecosystems are not like, I'm going to steal Victor Wong's metaphor here, is we think of local economies like a farm. There's like this crop and this crop and this crop, and everything's very organized, but they're not interconnected. And real economies are like the rainforest. They're messy, they're insane. And yet that's where innovation lives. And we need to embrace it joyously. And a lot of you on this call are already doing that. Any other thing pop up? I don't see anything else in the chat. Mo, did that help you?
It does. I still, I am a really firm believer in Heisenberg model, because for, I think, new emerging economies, at least give you a blueprint to how to start. Maybe it can evolve over time.
Well, see, and maybe that's a great research question. Is in fact, Yiping Liu, who is going to speak in a bit, actually did a study comparing two neighboring cities in China, where one of them said, we're going to do this top down. The institutions are going to drive everything because that's what Mao would have wanted.
Right.
The other city, we're going to do it bottom up. We're going to let the entrepreneurs lead the process because that's what Mao would have wanted. Kind of clever. And they were able to find a way. They work differently, but it is entirely possible. We do know that from industry cluster research that bottom-up clusters work much better than top-down, even in developing countries. However, having a blueprint that's an opportunity for power players to hijack it, but it's also a way to give policymakers a very simple roadmap for moving forward. Anyway, did that help?
Yes.
So we'll start that research project on Friday, maybe. Okay. You be careful what you ask for. Anyway, if there aren't any more questions, we have far better speakers involved. It looks like Eric is queued up. I'm going to shut up. Is that Eric is one of our unsung heroes in the field. All we know is everyone says, like, this is like the closest I've ever seen a picture of Eric to not smiling. He is one of the most joyous people in our field, and a fountain of common sense. And this is a dean, amazingly. Anyway, thanks, Mo. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to shut up and hand this off to Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice, and thank you, Eric. Also, we had one great question in the chat box about is ecosystem still not considered as a theory? And I think this is an amazing question that Eric could tell us about how we can build it. Is it a new theoretical stream, and how we can build a research in this new stream?
We're going to call it the Stan Theodoraki Kruger theory, but we'll now have to actually write it. So anyway, I'm going to mute. I'm on mute.
Well, thank you all for joining this AOM seminar from your home office. I think that's one of there are a lot of bad things about the COVID crisis, but one of the good things is that we are increasingly connected digitally, and we reduce our climate impact. So every disadvantage has its advantage, as one of the most famous Dutch football player Johan Cruyff once said. It's good to be amongst you, especially Norris and Christina. Thank you very much for making this happen, even on such a short notice. So well done. This is really entrepreneurial in practice and theory, I would say. Glad to be amongst you. Of course, I was intrigued, as always, by Nora's statement about Hilbert's 23 problems in mathematics. And given that I also collaborate with some mathematicians, I thought, well, I should know about this. So this was really an attempt to further develop mathematics as a discipline. And even though I like to agree with a lot of Nora's does, I think here we are somewhat astray, because I think entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial ecosystems is not a discipline. Sorry, Kruger, Norris. I think we're studying a phenomenon and we want to make this better. So that's why I want to call my short lecture Towards a Transdisciplinary Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Research Program. I think we all share a passion and caring and curiosity about what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem and how can we improve it. Christina, next one. But for that, I think we need to sort of, we as a community, because science ultimately is a community endeavor, we need to sort of get our heads together. Well, what do we care about? I think we don't care about having more entrepreneurs from, let's say, 100 million to 6 billion entrepreneurs in the world, or perhaps even 12 billion enterprises, because we all should be portfolio entrepreneurs. I think that's not something to strive for. I think something that to strive for is to think about how can entrepreneurship be a means to improve well-being? How can it be a means to tackle societal challenges? I think that is ultimately what we care about. And then, of course, we need to not only define our goals, but we need to know what we're talking about. So what is well-being? What does it include? Does it include income? Well, most people would say yes. Does it include subjective well-being? Well, some people would perhaps be in doubt. Would it include biodiversity? Well, you can have a discussion about that, but if we just use a word and don't give a loading and don't really have a discussion and also some consensus what we talk about, I think knowledge accumulation will be very hard and improvement will be even harder. And I'm not even talking about this thing called entrepreneurship, because even though I like entrepreneurship scholars, there's still no sort of unified definition like in mathematics of what entrepreneurship is. I think sometimes we are too narrow by focusing on self-employed or small businesses or new businesses. Or that might also be too broad, because a lot of new businesses might not be about entrepreneurship. There's a lot of entrepreneurship that we don't count because there's no census data around it. I think we should perhaps spend a bit more energy in what we care about and what are the concepts that we think are central. I think we have a way to go in comparison to mathematics, even if we have the ambition to go there. But I think that's the first discussion we need to have. So what does entrepreneurship need to lead to? What is productive entrepreneurship? What is destructive entrepreneurship? What are good concepts? What are good measurements? And measurements will indeed be my next statement. Even though we live in the age of big data, I think we as scholars of entrepreneurial ecosystems have by far not used the possibilities to measure the things that we care about and that we think are important and that need to be changed in reality. And I think here the ecosystem concept, analogy, ecological systems, I would say complex systems is helpful, because complex systems, that's not a theory. So I would not make a plea for an overarching theory of entrepreneurial ecosystems, but I think it is a framework that integrates, on the one hand, very micro phenomenon with a microscope, and I think we need to have better measures, better data on the one hand, on the very micro level, on the detail level. On the other hand, it ranges even to the macroscopic level well, astronomy is perhaps a bit too far, but we also need to have a conceptualization theories about the big picture. And I think an entrepreneurial ecosystem approach is able to combine the very micro to the very macro, and that's the middle picture, and a picture in the middle, that to deliver an actionable framework for people that care about improving economies. And then you need to have, well, this is a bit perhaps too literal, you need to have a cockpit, but at least you need to know what is going on, what is the problem, and if we aim to improve a particular problem, what is going on. And for that, I'm sorry, that's the core business of scientists. You need to measure this. And this can be done in more narrow, this can be done with words as well. So I'm not saying it's only numerical, but we need to do a much better job on measuring. And I think we are helped by being in the age of big data. There's so much more data around, but also the use of this data is surprisingly constrained and little. On the one hand, they say this is not rocket science, because then we would have perfect data. This is social science, so we always have to deal with incomplete, imperfect data, but we should do a much better job than we've done now. And I think that is part of a research program that we all care about, and we all need you. And why do we all need you? Next slide, Christina. Because we think the current state of affairs is not the best state of affairs that could be there. So we want to improve. We want to get better from today to tomorrow. And I'm also sort of echoing some of the statements by Norris. We need to know what kind of practices are invented, why they are invented, how they are invented, how can we create a better diagnosis about what the situation is today, how can we have a catalog of practices that enable people in particular settings to improve an ecosystem and make it a better ecosystem tomorrow, the next year, or perhaps even in 10 years, because this is very often a long-term issue. And then you need to know about the key mechanisms underlying reality. So what explains why some entrepreneurs in some settings are very productive and wealth enhancing, while in other settings, my favorite example is of course the mafia in southern Italy. They are very creative and ingenious, but well, they are not perhaps stimulating the kind of welfare that we care about. So you also need to think about the shadow sides. You need to think about the mechanisms, but also about the south of Italy is very different than Mozambique, is very different than the greater Boston area. So you also need to know the specificities of context. I think that is also one of the challenges of being a social scientist studying, or a scientist studying ecosystems. We need to sort of bridge, on the one hand, universal, generic mechanisms, on the other side, very specific context, histories, geographies. But well, if we want to improve it, I think that's the only thing to go for it. So combine mechanisms with very specific context, and in order to improve the world. So we are, I think, slightly different than mathematicians. They like sort of beautiful theories. We like them all as well, but we have sort of this goal, I think, implicitly or explicitly, to make the world a better place via entrepreneurship. That is our specialty as scholars of entrepreneurial ecosystems. So that brings me to my plea. Next slide, Christina. Not a plea for 23 Hilbert's questions, sorry Norris, but a plea for a transdisciplinary research program. So not like Richard Feynman, even though I like him as well, but my benchmark would be much more Elinor Ostrom, so the governance of the commons. So how can we bring together different scientific disciplines, ranging from economics to geography to public administration to sociology to business administration to psychology to computer science? How can we bring them to the table to have a collective effort in better conceptualizing and better measuring and better doing analysis of entrepreneurial ecosystems on the one hand. On the other hand, bridging science and practice. So bringing practitioners to the table as well, to be inspired by them. What are their problems? What are their stumbling blocks? What are generic constraints and particular constraints? So how can we be inspired by them? And also, if we have the ambition to affect reality, how can our data, our analysis change practice? And do we really see this practice, with this practice change, the world being changed? And do we see better entrepreneurship, more well-being arising? And I think there's a continuous cycle to have a conversation of scientists, practitioners learning from scientists learning from practitioners. There's a lot of translational work, so that's really not to be underestimated. I think you need to invest hugely in understanding each other and also investing in your own, either business or in your science. But there's division of labor. But if there's division of labor without connections, I think we're lost in a sort of black hole of silos, and we aim to achieve as a community better ecosystems. And I think we need to bring together disciplines, science and practice. And that is my call for a transdisciplinary research program on entrepreneurial ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. This was very inspiring, and I saw that there was several questions in the chat. Michael Mix and Alistair has really good points, and for example, how we can how we know, is it about the outcomes of the ecosystem, how we can measure it, what are the right measurements, how we can identify this dynamic of the ecosystem, of the metrics that are interconnected. I don't know if Michael want to ask the question. Michael?
Mike Meeks?
Okay. The question is about the well-being. What is the we in the ecosystem? Who defines it? Who establishes the outcome? Is it the government? Is it the researcher? Who identifies this we, and how we can answer what we are expecting of the ecosystem to be structured? I don't know, Eric, if you have an answer of that or an opinion.
Yeah, there are two answers to that. So, or at least two steps. First, you need to define what is the ecosystem that you're talking about. Is this the city of Toulouse? Is this the country of France? Is this the continent of Europe? Is this the whole world? And I think the answer depends on what you are responsible for. If you're the mayor of Toulouse, you will care about Toulouse. If you're the second answer would depend on the key mechanisms, the spatial, let's say, reach of that mechanism. If you talk about labor markets, a labor market is very often an area of 50 by 50 kilometers, so to say. Venture capital is frequently a 2-hour drive radius. So there are different, let's say, spatial demarcations of what an ecosystem is. If you agree on one of them, you would like to know what the well-being of the population, of the community is in that spatial territory. And then you need to have two difficult discussions, I think. What do you think well-being is about? A second, how do you want to measure this? And I think one of the great social science inventions that has gone astray is GDP. So there was a wonderful social science invention during the Great Depression in the previous century, which measured market-based activity. But we all know, I think, that is probably the least worst measure we have of welfare and prosperity. But I think the time has come to come up with better alternatives. And we should have both an ethical discussion on what we want to measure and what we care about, but also an epistemological discussion on what can we measure and how can we measure. That's not an easy answer, I'm afraid, but science is not always or hardly ever about easy answers. Christina, please unmute.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Eric. I think we can come back to the discussion about the metrics later. And I think now it will be interesting to have this new type of ecosystem, the virtual, based to the virtual society. Antonio?
Yeah. Thank you very much, all of you. And thanks for the invitation to participate in this and share a little bit what has been working in the last, let's say, maybe 40 years or now. So next one. Let me just tell you a little bit about what my position right now. I am in charge of the 6th campus in Tec de Monterrey in North Mexico. And I moved to Monterrey City, on the main campus, 3 years ago. And I was working in Chihuahua City, developing a technological park, and I was in charge of the entrepreneurship area from the last 40 years there. So right now, I'm in charge not only for develop the strategy for entrepreneurship spirit for the students, but also to build the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Monterrey City, not only the university, but also in Monterrey City. Next one. I just include a little bit some of the aspect that I want to cover in this presentation is some of the challenge, why we are working in the virtual university ecosystem, and what is some of the elements that we have been working in the last 2-3 years related with the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Next one. And this is why. First of all, one of the challenges that we faced at the beginning was the capacity. I mean, in terms of structure, budget, research, faculty, etc. And then one of the incentives to move and work in the ecosystem was the capacity. Start thinking about that support, start thinking about what are the elements of the ecosystem, and then build the ecosystem, entrepreneurship ecosystem in every one of the campus that I have in charge right now. So it's 6 campuses right now, including the main campus in Monterey City. And at the same time, we have been working in the virtuality because we need to connect our ecosystem, internal university ecosystem, with the environment. I mean, with the city, with the region right now. And some of the looking for efficiency to work in entrepreneurship. Why? Because we have a limited budget, we have a limited people working in entrepreneurship. So we needed to do that right now. And obviously the next one is how to integrate everything in terms of transversality around the university, not only one school, business school, but also engineering, medical, biotechnology, so on and so forth. And not only transversal at the schools, but also in high school, we have 6 high schools in our system, and then undergraduate and graduate programs. So it's horizontally in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit, and also work in vertically in every one of the levels that we have. Next one. And well, because the capacity, the financial situations, necessity to integrate, and now in February, because the COVID-19, we needed to move fast to integrate every one of the elements. And the first one, we developed and work with the university stakeholders. And let me tell you that this approach to call university stakeholders is because the units that we need to convince and work with in order to develop the entrepreneurship ecosystem. The professors, entrepreneurs, the directors and deans, funding by themselves, the students, or its families, and also schools and labs. What are the 5 elements that we need to work at the university level right now? Next one. And well, last year we started working to develop the platform. We say, well, let's go and start working in terms of platforms. And what we are looking for? Well, we don't know how do we know it works? Start a weekend or an event or a contest, so on and so forth. What is the best model to work with? And at the same time, start thinking about how to scale the operation for the university, not only internally, but also regionally and maybe country-wise. And start thinking about to design and transfer the technology for this ecosystem. So we work in integrate the data at the beginning, last year, unified language, integration of databases, and also visibility of information, transparent visibility. So start working in a platform, digital platform, in terms of automation, and to look for efficiency, and also what is the best model to that. So that's give us accountability, globalization, and profitability. Give us some of the individuals in charge of the program. We put it to work in another area, working in the system right now. Next one. And then we thought in 4 levels, 4 entrepreneurship layers, we call it. The first one was the base of that, infrastructure, physical spaces, technology parks, labs, incubator, so on and so forth. The second one was data and rules, regulations, incentives, and all the data. The third one was the programs and events that we work, any incubation, acceleration programs, events, contests, so on and so forth. And the 4th level was the most important for that. How the entrepreneurs consume entrepreneurship. And then we start working in the 4 levels, And now, for example, we have 3 months without the first level, not infrastructure. We don't have infrastructure. So this gives us the opportunity to move faster to the virtuality, working in data programs and how the entrepreneurs consume entrepreneurship right now. And we developed something that we call it Entrepreneurship Operation System. Next. At the same time, we thought, well, how we can track, follow up the students from the beginning of the undergraduate or maybe high school to the real when they finish, when they graduate from undergraduate or graduate programs. So one issue was how to promote and also provoke the entrepreneurship. How we can increase resources. How do we hit more than that we are doing right now? How we measure, you mentioned about the measuring, it's very important to keep in mind about how do we know it's working and how it doesn't work right now. What is the best model to work? And also a lot of information that the university and other entities ask about the information of entrepreneurship. Multiple stakeholders asking for information. So we develop we call it a Carnet E, which is how to manage each time they want students take a course or take a conference or a startup weekend. We just put it in the database and we follow these specific students through the studies at the university, and also when they finish the university. We still continue giving tracking what is important. That this is going to give you a lot of very good information, mainly for research to make decisions for the future. And we developed some of the data intelligence in terms of analysis, impact. We do a lot of activity. We have a lot of startup weekend. We have a lot of conference and meetings, so on and so forth. But now, what is the impact that we have right now? And automate all the reports that we have. So this gives us some efficiency. This is start this semester, the last semester. You have a bunch of information right now to do a research right now because this platform that we have, and also start connecting with other universities and entrepreneurship ecosystem. Next one. Also, something that we wanted to have is the connection with the region or the environment. So we decided to use at the beginning the Crunchbase platform that maybe you know about that in order to start connected with some prospect investment markets, so on and so forth. Next one. And in this last 4 months, we developed some platforms because we moved from our programs to virtual programs. So the first one is create a virtual crowds, students, entrepreneurs with common objectives like biotechnology or mechatronics, medical devices, so on and so forth. We developed, we have right now 14 virtual crowds, student virtual crowds, and we manage that. The second one is the Tech Lean. We call it Tech Lean, our incubator. Let's say that way. So virtual incubator accelerator program is a Tech Lean. And then we develop we name it Series. Series is the bunch of virtual workshops, talks, conference, all the content related with entrepreneurship. I know we have something like close to 300 contents right now in virtually. And then virtual program for entrepreneurship technology base is innovation to journal. And then mentor management, we needed to develop a platform to manage the mentors right now. Was not easy, but it's working well. And then the virtual demo day. And the last one was to put it some platform to help the small and medium-sized enterprises to move from your perspective to the digital transformation. This has been a success program. We have around 300 small and medium-sized enterprises just moving in that direction. Next one. This is our virtual incubator and virtual accelerator. We have three, let's say it's environments. The first one is the idea phase. The second is a launch. And then the third one is grow. The grow is like accelerator right now. And the last we are working, everything is online right now, virtually, all the program that we have. Something is happening is that a lot of people from other states, other universities are asking to move to the virtuality right now. So we expanded the program for incubation and acceleration right now. Next one. And then I try to explain a little bit what is how we connect this virtual units, virtual platforms internally in the university and also externally to the region. So the main issue here, the center is the entrepreneurs right now here. And as you can see, for example, entrepreneurs, we have a Carnet E, what is the tracking for the entrepreneurs, not only the university, but after they graduate. And the first is the university stakeholders. We use the stakeholders there, and we have the whole programs there. And we have the entrepreneurship operation system working in this environment, the university environment. But at the same time, we start connecting with other universities, with corporation, government, investors, I'm leading also the MIT REAP program in Monterey City. So giving opportunity not only to understand what is happening in the university, but also what happened in the city right now. So we start connecting a lot of programs with other universities, with corporations, investors, and government right now. This is more or less what is the concept that we are working in this virtual entrepreneurship ecosystem. Next one. And something that we'd like to show you, and also if somebody wants to participate in that, we are working how to develop a virtual university entrepreneurship ecosystem. Right now, we have a lot of information. We have a lot of that we have been doing in the last 3-4 months, in the last year, working in some of the platforms. And as you said before, measure results. What is what result that we have right now compared with the last year or before the last year? And how to manage both. I mean, I call it the traditional university entrepreneurship ecosystem and the virtual, because something that we saw that is something that the two ecosystem needs to work together. Something the hybrid ecosystem model for entrepreneurship, and also something that we have been working in the last 10 years is develop entrepreneurship competence through the ecosystem. What we need to do in the ecosystem, how, when, and where. This is more or less what we are working right now in Tec de Monterrey, and I'm very open to hear what is the suggestions and also to participate in the programs that you are working on. Next one. And we said, well, right now, this time, the virtual is the reality. So let's go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for the very inspiring presentation. And I don't know, you haven't followed, but in the chat, there was a very intense discussion about how important and how current is the topic and how we can see a very bottom-up initiative coming up and structuring. We had great questions about how the university ecosystem and the virtual ecosystem can develop further the regional ecosystem. And also we have great questions about the boundaries. I don't know, Norris, should we try to answer, or should we proceed probably to the next presentation and engage in all these questions in the end?
Well, why don't we plunge ahead, because we've got 2 more, and then we can, I suspect that what Yiping's going to talk about is going to actually advance that discussion, and then we can force Bernd to give us all the answers. Bernd is just like hiding under his desk now, but I'm excited. Let's just go ahead and plunge ahead on the presentations, and so we have plenty of time for discussion at the end.
Eben?
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Christina, and thanks, Norris. It's my great pleasure to join this special Academy Management PDW 2020 special webinar, and it's my my great pleasure. I'm delighted to join a very distinguished panels after hearing many experts talking about ecosystem research, and Norris and Eric and also Professor Antonia. So what I like to do is to bring a little bit of a cultural flavor to the ecosystem discussion. And so my title is a cultural and entrepreneurship ecosystem, a West meets East perspectives. So what I like to share in the next couple minutes is try to share my understandings and some of my research on entrepreneurship, in particular international entrepreneurship in the context of China. And then I like to use this as an example by focusing on the mobility of talent and see how the culture can affect or influence and shape entrepreneurial behaviors, attitudes, and activities. And then we'll conclude by asking the question, and hopefully we can stimulate the interesting discussion, how culture can help us to shape and build an ecosystem around the world. So that's going to be the outline. So next slide, please. Thank you. I would like to share one sentence from a very famous, quite influential linguistic, Lin Yutang, and in his generation. And he actually wrote and tried to translate the classic Chinese text into English and become the bestsellers in the West. For example, his book on My Country and Nations. So, and his sentence here I like to share is versed with the West and East cultures and concentrated in reviewing writings of the world. So what I like to share is really thinking about how can we bring these cultural aspects from different locations from the world and try to understand and try to help us to stimulate the discussion, debate, and research on entrepreneurship ecosystem. So because as we know, so the West and East are quite different, but then how can we build our mutual understandings? How can we help entrepreneurs, stakeholders in different contexts? Yeah? So to build and can actually create vibrant ecosystem. So that is really my dream to share and hopefully to stimulate. Next slide, please. What I like to share is, I think it's one particular research stream, and I think it actually has quite a strong implication for entrepreneurship ecosystem research. This is the phenomenon of the global talent mobility. I would say the people, especially the entrepreneur talent, moving around the world and move across the geographic boundaries. And this stream research is not new. Actually, 15 years ago, Professor Saxenia from UC Berkeley already wrote the book, New Argonauts, and she talked about the regional advantage in a global economy. And her argument is how the entrepreneur talent, when they move around the world, can help different parts of the world become more innovative. For example, the case of Israel. In her book, she said that because of Israel entrepreneurs spend time in Silicon Valley and build their ventures, and when they move back to Israel, actually help Israel, the entrepreneurs, become a more vibrant, a new cluster of innovation. And actually what I think that this phenomenon is actually happening in a lot of emerging economies. So if I use China as example, and in 2016, together with Dr. Wang, a state counselor for Chinese government, and I together edited a book called Entrepreneurship and Talent Management from Global Perspective. In this book, we try to document and study how the entrepreneurs, particular returnees, when they go back to their home countries, how they can shape and contribute to the local innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem. And by coincidence, actually, the 2016, I also organized a symposium together with Norris at Academy of Management. And so we also host an event. So I see this as a continuity of the discussion and to highlight the importance of the role of talent and how they can contribute to the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem and how culture can play a role. So next slide, please. Normally, when we talk about the entrepreneur talent, what are the kind of the consequences when they move around the world? The one major area researchers and policymakers look at it will be knowledge transfer, right? So these people, they have knowledge, expertise, and they also have the know-how. When they move around the world, they actually help the local community and local regions to develop entrepreneurship innovations. And so the example I mentioned earlier, so the connection between Silicon Valley and Israel, the high-tech emergency. And also the literature suggests that returning entrepreneurs actually can help to accelerate the development of high-tech industries. I also have done some work on the solar photovoltaic industry. So when you look at the returning entrepreneurs, when they go back, they actually can collaborate with a wide range of actors and stakeholders to grow the business quite quickly. But one central question actually I like to ask is, when these people, even though we call them returnees, when they move around the world, but imagine if Chinese entrepreneurs have spent a very long time in the West context, say in the US or Europe, and then when this particular entrepreneur goes back to his home country, how can he handle the local context? And one key question is actually the role of culture. How culture can actually affect their behaviors, their activities, and affect how they develop the entrepreneurial ventures. Next slide, please. So that actually the question of culture. So in the last 10 years, I have been working on this area, and I try to understand this phenomenon of transnational entrepreneur or returning entrepreneurs by looking at different levels of analysis, both the individuals, how the cultural differences can affect entrepreneur decision-making, and how the entrepreneur can contribute to grow on a firm level, organization level, but also on a regional level. So that relates to our topic of ecosystem and about the kind of the innovation and regional development, and also institutional development, because as we know, emerging economies are changing very fast. So the notion of emerging economy is actually the rapid transforming, rapid changes. So what I'd like to do in the next couple of minutes is to share some of the research where I highlighted the role of culture and how culture can affect entrepreneur behaviors and how that can help us to think about culture's role in the broader discourse of entrepreneurship ecosystem. So next slide, please. So the first study I'd like to share is by looking at on the individual level and how entrepreneurs, here I compare both the returnees, we use them as a proxy for Western cultures because they have been trained and get professional experience in the Western context. I compare them to the domestic entrepreneurs. So I call them like influenced by the East culture. So this particular study, what we find out actually is the way to perceive and to react to uncertainties are quite different. So if you look at the West influenced, let's say, returning entrepreneurs versus the local domestic entrepreneurs influenced by East culture. And this actually draws from the cultural psychology literature, and we look at how here we use the theory of a type of uncertainty. So a different type of uncertainty and how uncertainty can be understood and what is the effect of uncertainty and also how entrepreneurs respond to uncertainty. So very briefly, for example, the state uncertainty. So that basically means how you perceive the environmental uncertainty. So the returning entrepreneurs influenced by West cultures, they tend to focus on the focal change.
while the domestic entrepreneurs tend to look at a broader picture, more the contextual changes. And if you look at the effect of uncertainty, the returning entrepreneurs tend to focus on the more professional sphere, so in the workplace. But then the domestic entrepreneurs, they tend to relate the uncertainty to other activities, like in their beyond work, and also linked to their life, daily life, and help them to find a solution to address this uncertainty. And if you look at the response uncertainty, then we use the reasoning of logical reasoning, and it's actually also interesting to look at the causal kind of causal analysis, very influenced by the West. But then the domestic entrepreneurs tend to use more like a holistic view of thinking. So I think this really gives us some insights to understand the behaviors of entrepreneurs. They actually quite strongly influenced by the cultures. Yeah? So when you think about the returning entrepreneurs, when they go back to China, they understand the culture, but actually not all of them really can adapt and integrate to the local context because they have been far away for a long time, right? So I think that really can help us to understand, especially when you're thinking about building an ecosystem, when you try to attract a talent globally back to your community, back to your region, how these entrepreneurs can really integrate it, how they can really work together and interact with other actors. That is going to be a challenge. Thank you. And next slide, please. And then another study I like to also to share, I think, even though the previous one we saw the differences, but then there are also some entrepreneurs, I call them as bioculture individuals. Bioculture individuals actually are the entrepreneurs. They can internalize multiple culture schema internally. So which means that they can navigate through different cultures. And this is actually very, very important. I think very powerful when you examine the entrepreneurs. And this level of cultural sensitivity really help them to navigate through the complexity and also to leverage the cultures. And then for this study, I look at how these transnational entrepreneurs, which I call them as biocultural individuals, can actually leverage the cultural advantages by both the East and West and try to grow their companies globally, grow quickly because they are in the solar photovoltaic industry, and then the kind of born global firms. So how their knowledge and cultural flexibility can really help grow the firms very quickly. So I think this is also another aspect for us to really think about. So the culture is very nuanced. So it's not easy just to say, okay, this is a clear kind of a boundary. Actually, some entrepreneurs, they are very skillful to integrate and to develop their own cultural competence. And the next slide, please. So the last one, what I like to share is actually linked to the topic of ecosystem and regional entrepreneurship development. And as we know that, or Eric and Norris also mentioned earlier that the ecosystem is more like a phenomenon. So, but there are many theories used to examine the ecosystem. And then the triple helix actually is a very popular model that has been used a lot around different places, especially in the West context. And in this particular study, what we actually try to ask is whether we can use the triple helix model in the emerging market context. If yes, to what extent? If not, how can we kind of relax or change some of the conditions or assumptions in order to make this theory work? So this is exactly this study what we tried to do. And we say that actually the triple helix model has a very strong assumption. The assumption is you have a very good university. So the university can interact with government, with industry. And if you look at around the world, example like Cambridge in the UK or Berkeley and Stanford or Harvard and MIT. So all these very vibrant areas, they all have very good universities. But then when we look at emerging economies, so they are still kind of developing. So their university might not that good, or maybe one day they will become world class, but they're still not there yet. So therefore, the question here we try to ask is, if a university itself is not strong, does not have the capabilities that we observe in the West context, how can we still promote regional entrepreneurship and innovation to build entrepreneurship ecosystem? So this study, we look at like actually two areas in a Chinese context, and we actually bring the concept of university capability as a micro foundation for a triple helix model. So we say the triple helix model at the moment did not really specify how you can perceive the university capability. But if you don't really have that university capability, how could we actually compensate that in order to make this model works? So next slide, please. So without further ado, I will just quickly summarize what we found out. And I think it also could be an interesting way to view and to understand the emerging markets when they are very active in building regional entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem. So this study, we basically propose the concept university capability by building upon the literature on organizational capability, and then try to argue the university capability can serve as one micro foundation for the triple helix model, because you need to have it. But how to have it, there could be different pathways. So some city, they can build their own universities, right? They can build their universities if they don't have, and it will also take a bit longer. But some cities, actually, they can use alternative approach. For instance, in this case, they could actually attract the returnee talent to substitute the local universities. So in this study, we basically demonstrate there could be different pathways for the different regions emerging, especially in the emerging economy context, to build and to develop regional entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem. Next slide, please. So to conclude, what I like to say is the entrepreneurship ecosystem, I think the talent, especially the entrepreneur talent, could be a very important area for us to better understand the ecosystem, and also for us to better build a function ecosystem. So I hope that, of course, when the talent move around, we also see a previous example. They also face the challenge of cultural differences. How can they manage the different cultures? So hopefully this can help us to further move the discussion and research, and also to inform practice with stakeholders to build an ecosystem around the world. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Weber. There was a very passionate discussion in parallel. There are so many topics and connections that arise. I think it's like a co-creation of research and topics on ecosystem, linking culture, university, mindset. So I don't know if Norris, you want to have like a synthesis, or we can proceed, or.
Yeah, well, let's talk to Bernd. I am, that Yiping and Antonio raised some very, very fascinating stuff, and I suspect half the people on this call are going to steal Antonio's model. But this perspective on talent, I think, is really, there is a really important. We're all global now, but there are still local cultural differences that. There are a lot of people where I live. We are supposed to be a high potential to be a great tech hub, and they want us to be like Silicon Valley. And that's how can we? Yiping said, how do we leverage our cultural competencies? Is going to make this even more interesting than before. But I'm looking forward to hearing from Bernd, and I've talked too much already.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great job, Yiping.
Yeah.
Bernd, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go
Can you
on.
hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Great. Yeah, thanks again, Norris and Christina for organizing this, and it's great to be involved. I unfortunately, just to not raise expectations even more, as Norris already did, I don't have all the answers, but I hope I can contribute to the way we're finding the answers throughout my short presentation. I'm not going to talk too much about my own research. I'm happy to add some of that at the end and feed in some of the work that I've done. But the main thing that I wanted to talk about today is kind of like building on some of the research and work that has been presented and what we've been trying to do with the ERN network and bringing that together and kind of like disseminating that knowledge. Can you move to the next slide, please? So what was the idea behind that? We've already talked about Daniel Eisenberg's work, and that a lot of those factors and actors and ecosystems are always looked at as silos. The way we looked at entrepreneurship research is, it's kind of like the same. Like a lot of, like we touched on, we work with lots of disciplines, and Eric already made the plea for a more transdisciplinary research project. But we felt like we need to do something to connect people more, and again, not just researchers from different backgrounds, excuse me, but also connecting with practice, connecting with policymakers, learning from what people are doing, and finding better ways to disseminate our research findings, because it's not enough to just publish our research in journals if we really want to make an impact in the world. And so that's where we started ERN, really to kind of like disseminate and learning from each other. Can you go to the next slide, please? Again, like a lot of this, I think Eric has made a great point about most of these things, so I don't want to go into too much detail here. And what do we want to do? Why do we care about ecosystems? And how can we measure them? Like, these are important issues, and it's an important conceptualization in terms of how do we foster entrepreneurial behavior in regions. And again, that region could be a small city, it could be a rural area. What we see here in Scotland, for example, some of the research that I've done on universities, entrepreneurial universities, that the challenges that they face, if we look at the old research-intensive universities, University of Glasgow, Edinburgh, St. Andrews, are very different compared to universities like the University of West of Scotland or Highlands and Islands, that has 13 campuses spread over I don't know how many square miles. So for them, like, access to people, even working with companies, can mean for them, like, it's a one-day trip to just visit the university and going back to where they're based. So they have a completely different relationship with their ecosystem, essentially. And again, the spatial boundaries of the ecosystem are completely different for some of these universities. So again, what can we learn about that? How can we strategically manage places? And again, with the rise of being connected virtually, what does that mean for the concept of ecosystems? Fundamentally, and I think Nora's already made that point quite clear. Ecosystems are about people. It's about connecting people. We've just heard about the role of talent, and I couldn't agree more with that. And again, but we also see stories that we develop incubator programs and try to do our best, but then people within the incubator don't even really talk to each other, but still rely on their prior ties. So what does that mean for fostering entrepreneurial communities? Of how do we bring people together? How do we create trust among people, collaboration, and so on? And then lastly, looking at different configurations of ecosystem. What do we determine to be the desired output? Eric raised the issue about well-being. How do we measure economic growth? That kind of like widely used, but it's a very obscure construct of GDP that certainly doesn't measure a lot of these activities, and a lot of innovation isn't measured as part of GDP. So what do we want? And I think about how do we get there? Can you move to the next slide, please? So what have we done? So we've started out with we had a few activities over the years, and also started the website and everything, and I'll get to that in a minute. I just want to give you that kind of flavor of things that we have done. I think one of the highlights was certainly the Tech Ecosystem Camp 2016 in Frankfurt, where we worked with Tech Quartier. I don't know if anyone has came across them. It's a really fascinating place. They do lots of good work there in fostering the whole community in Frankfurt. They have different sorts of programs for startups of all sizes. They have an accelerator program. And this was in the very, very early stages when Tech Quartier was born. And we had a workshop with, I think, around 35 people. And we put them into multiple working groups throughout the day. And it was really interactive. You can see like JF from Startup Genome was there. And can you go to the next slide, please? And here's like a picture of what we had these groups, like really had them working and presenting back to everyone and broke them up with different questions. And that's what I really like what Norris is doing here. Like, what are the key questions that we're working towards? And at that workshop, we did a similar thing. Probably our questions weren't as good as what we've collaboratively under Norris' leadership have come up with now. But it really helped. Can you move to the next slide, please? When we took all that together, you know, we came up with like a list of 5 or 6 action points, and you know, Tech Quartier are still using them in most of the things that they do. So really making a practical impact was really interesting. On the academic side, we partnered with the ISBM network in 2017 and had a workshop as part of their conference in Melbourne. Can you go to the next slide, please, Christina? But how do we move forward from here? And a few things, again, I think it ties in quite nicely with what we have done. You know, how do you develop ecosystems that purposely address social and economic inclusion? How can we be more inclusive? You know, how do we not just focus on growth, but, you know, also focus on companies that address our grand societal challenges or the UN SDGs that come to mind? Increasing connectivity without creating chaos. A bit of chaos is needed, a bit of that kind of rainforest wilderness, but it still needs to be manageable for startups, for example, to find the right resources, to have access to the right people at the right time. Again, how do we link local ecosystems to global value chains and platforms? And Christina raised that issue already in the chat box. And for us, the way forward is, we looked in the beginning at ERN as like, oh, as a kind of membership model, but we want to move a lot beyond that, and we don't want to have members, we want to have contributors and collaborators. And what that means in particular, can you go to the next slide, please? You know, we want to hear from you, and we want to invite you to share your work with us. And that can be, you know, new research that you'd like to disseminate, you know, in the form of, you know, we can organize podcasts or interviews. Christina and Sarah, who I think also is hopefully still on the call, have done a great job here and providing a framework where we can, you know, work with you, help you disseminate and put that into different kind of formats to make it more accessible beyond just the academic publication, or in the form of like guest blog posts or articles, or if you feel like, you know, you've presented your research somewhere and there's a video and you'd like us to highlight that, we'd be more than happy to do that. And again, it doesn't need to be academic papers. It can be, you know, policy work. It can be practitioner work. Semprende is one of the examples that we've been working with in Honduras, where they're doing really interesting work in really building ecosystems from the ground up. And so please get in contact with me or Christina. I think if you go to the next slide, please. We have a mailing list. Here's a quick overview of some of the universities and organizations that we've worked with. I think afterwards is also connect with us over Twitter or And please send us an email if we can work with you, if we can help you, disseminate your work, disseminate your message. If we can provide any sort of assistance to you, may that be through academic work, or provide academic insights into more practical work and maybe support you in that way, but also vice versa, then please get in touch.
Thank you very much, Ben. And exactly, I want to also encourage, because I think we are several people that are interested about the ecosystem, and the idea here is to connect and share. And the chat today was so, show exactly that, that we could create some ideas, and we can test, and we can be federated by the ecosystem phenomenon or research field, or to test initiatives. And I think the virtual ecosystem was exactly that, and how we can share this knowledge. So we encourage you, the AOM can be a first place to share materials, engage in podcasts, in examples on comparative studies or culture. So it could be an interesting thing to engage. I don't know, Norris, if you wish to.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm, this is like the basketball dream team. Just such amazing presenters. We got amazing people in the audience, and that recurring theme. It's all about people, and I think we've got some great folks, and we hope. And I want to echo. Let's stay in touch. The PDW last year, face to face. At least 4 new research partnerships came out of that. Now we have an opportunity to extend that to the practitioner, the policy, the ecosystem people, and we've got some people on the call who managed to have a foot in multiple camps. CJ is a recovering college professor and center director, and now one of the leading lights of eShip. We just got some great people. So I would like, if there are any of the more on the practitioner side have any really burning questions that you'd like to add, I want to make sure that your voices are heard. Maybe Anthony Caesar has a question. I just scared Anthony.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, I thought this information is very, very helpful and very fruitful, especially as someone of color. As we talk about opening these ecosystems, I live in Maryland, so I'm very close to the Baltimore ecosystem, and as you can see, COVID has ravaged Baltimore pretty much, and it's not finished, right? So what does that look like moving forward? There's also been, I'm very connected in this space, so there's been a large push for AI programs and things of that nature, right? But as we talk about an ecosystem, we want to make it better. I think that it also takes really honing in on some specifics, like Baltimore City is a district where there is no heat and no AC inside of the schools. So when we're talking about creating a workforce that is thinking along for forward thinking, we have to really look at at least in my opinion, look at the systems at which these people are coming up through, right? If you don't get a formal education or a lot of information about entrepreneurship, about the different mediums available to you, in some ways, the jargon and even all of these sometimes terminologies, I think, can get a little bit muddy, right? Regular people feel like this information is inaccessible to them when they're the ones that this information is really targeted towards. So I think us really just trying to think about ways that the information, and I'm also thinking about this, right? I started trying to create a video series. I was editing it this morning, but ways that we can get this dialogue and information to sound less only accessible to Harvard educated people or Harvard Business Law putting out an article where someone may not read that if they see it's Harvard Business Law. They may not think that their educational prowess or whatever you may is up to buff. So.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. He's working with a group called EcoMap, and they're doing some worth looking up because they're doing some very interesting stuff. And I bet you they have a lot of data we could steal. Collaborate on.
Yes, of course.
That there are some some amazing questions. And Cesar from Malmo wants to know if, we're using the model of social insects, are we building an ecosystem hive right before our very eyes? Cesar, did you want to chime in? Cesar from Malmo, Antoine? Oh my God, we put him to sleep. Nigel, are you still with us? Share a little bit of what you've got. You've got some interesting phenomena that are going on in Buckinghamshire.
Yeah, I'm 150% with Anthony there. We need to try and keep it in the real world as well. I, as you know, I'm this lovely professor of professional practice, so I pretend to be an academic, but it's getting the message out there. Remember, we work in a tiny town called Buckingham, which is not the palace; it's the original town, and it has a total of 13,000 population. Most universities in the UK have got about 10 times that, or no, 5 times that. Large numbers. We have 2,500 students, so we're tiny. We're also the only independent university, so we're renegades and a bit different. So we do things differently here, and we try and work with our local group. And we have a local group which is called the Startup Decompression Group, which meet on a Friday nights when we used to be allowed in pubs, in a pub. And the range of people is from entrepreneurs through to a poet, an entrepreneurship educator, me, and also a professor of economics was involved. So an amazing group of people who all help each other in their own sweet way. I've just had something from one of my colleagues there who's come up with an idea for how on earth we're going to set up proper spaces in university offices. And he's given me something. So this is the kind of thing that goes on, and we should be encouraging more of it to go on so that people see that the face of universities is a reasonable face. And that's what I'd like to get across. And that's why I think Anthony's comment was absolutely brilliant. Nothing against all the wonderful researchers, but we've got to get it out there with the real entrepreneurs and get them working with us. That's my bit anyway.
Thanks, Nigel. It looked like Cesar Antoine was trying to get in. The only one wearing a necktie in the crowd. We saw his face briefly. Well, until we get him back on. CJ, did you want to add anything?
No, I thought this was extraordinary, and nothing really had. Still trying to digest. I'd love to pour through a lot of the information in slides. I don't know if I missed it, if there was a link or a promise to get us the materials from this.
Yeah, we will take care of that, because there are a lot of good slides I want to borrow.
Yeah.
So, but great to have you. You've been a real difference maker since you joined the eShip crowd on Goal 5. Asif and Beauty from Dhaka, Bangladesh. Do either of you have a question or a comment?
Hello, everybody. Hello, am I audible to you?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
And you look better than I do in the picture.
Thank you so much. So it was. I don't have any question, because a lot of questions, answers I have got already, and I really like the way every presenters have present and shared their thoughts. And as you mentioned in the comment that the university ecosystem, this actually is the thing. I was working for last 4 to 5 years on this university ecosystem development in Bangladesh. So it will help me a lot, and some other more things. And last one, the EERN one, I really like that, and I hope. And thanks to you for inviting me, and also this meeting. A lot of things I want to collaborate with all of you, so that we can do things together for the betterment of the globalization and the global entrepreneurship ecosystem in the, from our side.
Oh, we're glad. Is it Asif and Beauty were working at Daffodil International University, the largest private university in Bangladesh. And instead of building university programs and then reaching out to the community, instead they started out by reaching out and building up pieces of the ecosystem, and then deciding how they're going to proceed. I mean, they created a startup grind chapter. They have a startup huddle. They are working with Global Entrepreneurship Network. In fact, they were Rookie Program of the Year, I think, at last year's Global Entrepreneurship Summit. So we have some great talent here. I hope, is Alexandra still with us, or did she have to leave? But say how, if you are still on, can you say hello? Alexandra from Skopje, Republic of North Macedonia.
Hello, Norris. Hello, Christina. Hello, everybody. Thank you for doing this. It is an honor to be with this group and to have the opportunity to listen to all the speakers and to follow the discussion. Great ideas. I like especially the discussion about culture, because I think also that is some of the aspects I'm considering now. Coming from a different cultural standpoint, I think that this virtual reality, as Christina mentioned, has bounded us together more than ever, but we can leverage still on cultural differences and make the most of it. Maybe also learn, for instance, very inspiring, as I mentioned, Professor Antonio, he has opened up some new thinking and new ideas. So I think this is a very good opportunity to kind of share things and to move things forward. Although we are different, we kind of depend upon each other. And I think this crisis has made this more visible than ever, that we are all connected somehow and we all depend upon each other. We can learn from each other. So it is a great job.
Thank you, Alexandra. Is, that's the great thing about this is it may not be a huge number of people studying ecosystems, whether as practitioner or policymaker or scholar. The talent level is astounding, and Alexandra is leading an initiative is cooking up ways to grow the ecosystem in North Macedonia and beyond. So you may be hearing from her. She dragged me into a webinar there, and that was absolutely delightful, because they understand the importance of engaging the practitioner. I see Alan. Alan joined us also from Mexico. Any thoughts, Alan?
Hi, how are you doing?
We're trying to make everybody talk, so no slackers.
Yeah, I noticed.
No slackers.
It's fine. It's fine. Well, yeah, I missed the first presentation. I think it was Eric's presentation, but the second half, as far as I hear, it's amazing points of view. It made me think more about my own research on ecosystems. I think it's great at the end that we need to remain like the focus that, besides having published research and all that kind of things, the main point of doing all this is that how we all can contribute in making a better ecosystems from our own regions and where we work to. Because at the end, we know entrepreneurship, it's what pushes the economic growth. So I think we all have a very, very great opportunity to keep doing and improving the field, to keep contributing in this sense. And it's amazing to have all these great speakers and people in the crowd. I believe we can work together. I have new ideas for my own after hearing all your presentations. And it's amazing, yeah.
Well, I like how, because your university and Antonio's and Asif's, that they're all they're not, hi, we're the local university. We're here to tell the peasants what to do. We're experts in entrepreneurship, and we're going to, that the reaching out, fundraising, the connecting is something that I think is a fascinating issue, because, a lot of institutions network very poorly. It's frightening to see SBDCs, small business development centers, that are supposed to be networking with the entrepreneurial community, and they're, you know, they seem to be more isolated. Well, Aaron DeFort, I see you're a new face here. Do you have any question or any comment?
No, not really, but I'm glad to be here because I'm in the middle of my PhD journey in the realm of entrepreneurial ecosystems as well. So this was very inspiring.
As Dante said it, insights. Abandon all hope, not yes. Ye who enter here. But please stay in touch. We got a lot of people. You have fallen into quite a large number of people who are eager to help you. So look, I would say, look forward to that. I'm seeing what other names here we haven't harassed. I mean, Jacqueline Zonkapiran, are you still with us?
Just also to say, to add probably, because I hear that, sorry, go on. I jumped in there.
Actually, I saw a blog post somewhere, the most common statement in 2020 has been, your mic is off. So anyway, okay, Christina, I guess we'll go back to you afterwards, in the meantime, while my mic is on. So my area is ambiguity, as Norris might have mentioned. And obviously, wiping in information and categorization of uncertainty into 3 areas was really interesting to me. And particularly, like, he allows for state, effect, and response. And each one of those can change differently in terms of how the entrepreneur and the entrepreneurial ecosystem can cope with that. So, and it allows also for dynamic and static ways of coping with that. So that's very, I see that as a really rich area to continue to explore. And also another area that's really important to ambiguity, or ambiguity being uncertainty that we can't possibly know. So unknowns that are not possible to resolve, including those that we might not have the information to be able to resolve. So the idea of managing information that Antonio was discussing, and how he's managed to create this transdisciplinary, like Eric was talking about, transdisciplinary system in a virtual space, and helping with managing information, seeing that as a pain point that needs to be managed was really interesting to me. So fantastic. Thanks so much for this lineup, Christina and Norris.
By the way, I've got, I don't know if anybody else is eager to talk. Otherwise, I'll make Alistair talk. Alistair is a favored a fellow recovering physicist, so we both have a little twist in our brains from that. I see Mo. Did you want to say something?
Yes, I have probably the toughest question for you. If you have a university which has a non-existent ecosystem, how would you start one?
Christina, can we extend 2 more hours on? Okay, Mo. Okay, I'm going to question back to you. Why don't we have a discussion about? Let's have a webinar on that very question as we move forward. That's a great topic, and I'm sure perfect. The practitioners will show up with their baseball bats, smacking the universities in the head, probably. But I think my gut answer is, if you're starting from scratch, from nothing, it might actually be easier than trying to fix all the silos. Beauty Akhtar and Asif Iqbal, who are from Bangladesh, that's essentially what they did. So the 3 of you guys should talk.
Perfect.
And that's just astounding. By the way, could everybody take their mics off mute? Have everybody be live for just a second here? It's fun watching the chat. So could we? I want everybody to get their mic, turn their mics on. I mean, everyone who's still awake. Okay, I would like everyone to give. I don't know how to do this, but I want to give a standing ovation to Christina, because she was the brain. She was the Can we give her a clap? Christina, this wouldn't have happened. Christina. Okay, that's enough. Anyway, we made her laugh. So, Christina, do you want to wrap up? We're in the last 5 minutes. Look at it, she's blushing. Yes.
I was so excited about that, and I found so fruitful discussion, and exactly how we can establish a long-term strategy for establishing an ecosystem. It's also, as you say, it's like a big issue. And I remember, because I see that there are a lot of PhD students, I remember that when I started my PhD student on entrepreneurial ecosystem in 2013, there was like so many criticisms saying, avoid this topic, it's just a phenomenon, it's even not an issue, is a metaphor that researchers should not explore. And today I feel so proud and so glad to see that there is a community, and I stayed in this topic and I found it passionate. This is the passion, I think, and this community has all this passion. Is all about people trying to do something. And finally I ended up my PhD student with two best dissertation awards. So I think it's like showing also all these people today that we find that they have succeeded from where they started and what difficulties they were facing and how they engage in the discussion. So I think today is what we're trying to do. So connect, and probably I found also the spirit in the chat box. Hopefully we have registered that and we'll post it, because I found so many inspiring topics that will lead the next research, but not only research, like acting to our ecosystem, how we can bring our knowledge and have a contribution to our local ecosystem. And actually, to wrap up this session, I don't know, we're starting like about an hour, and it's been like 2 hours now, and it's so passionate and interesting. So we will share all these slides. So it's a big summary of what we saw. There is a special issue about ecosystem, about innovation ecosystem and strategies. There's a network that is structured. We saw that Bernd saying about the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Research Network. We'll also share the links, and we'll share the presentation also. Norris was stating this important impact of ASHIP and the 2 years PDU that we're trying to continue this discussion. But also for the next steps, there is the ICSB that was postponed this year, but it will be in Paris next year, 2021. So it's about human entrepreneurship and how can be like human entrepreneurship in ecosystem, how we can add the humanity in the ecosystem, and this can also open interesting discussions. With Bernd and Eric, we had a symposium proposal to the EURAM 2020, so it was postponed in December, so we can continue this about how we can build sustainable societies. And there is also a conference in the Academy on Entrepreneurship and Innovation Conference. It will be in Tunisia, October 2020, and we have the deadline for submission of research or engaging a discussion in February. So if you find interesting ideas, it's about the how the ecosystem pivot, how evolve, what is interesting example as the virtual ecosystem. So if you have any idea or you wish to engage in a discussion, please say it and commit. And would like once again to remember you that this is a collective thing. So we invite you to fill the ecosystem wiki, the amazing idea of Norris, and we'll share you also the link. I don't know, Norris, you have already previously shared the link. So if you have any material or idea or project you need to share with the community, please do it there. And or just send us an email to me or Norris and see what we can do all collectively. And a big, big thank you to Norris, because he believes in this and he encourages all these ideas. So I think we need people like that. Thank you. So Norris,